Okay, right. I'm going live. Okay, Josh, let's start this session.
Hey guys,
So,
so the testing is done. So
yeah.
we are all up and up.
So,
So I
welcome,
think most of
Josh.
them just woke up now.
Guys, this is Joshua. Like, he's a CTO of Hammerplay, and Joshua, we are very pleased to welcome you here. And I know you have been a very big fan of game jams, and you are a great developer. So, I welcome you here. So,
Thank you.
I would like to hear about your journey or into the game industry and what inspired you to become a game developer.
Okay, so whether you guys know it or not, I am pretty old. So I'm 30 plus, but not that old. So I grew up in the 90s, right? So 90s was a weird time in most cases. We had Mario. Till date, 90s is like considered to be the best time for games, right? Where true innovation was happening back then. And then by 2000-ish beginning, I think it was on a down spiral. And then by the end of 2008 or 7, I think the casual and indie market sort of like picked up. So my journey is pretty typical. When I started out, I knew that I was sort of an engineer. I always liked problem solving. I've been programming since my sixth grade. So sixth grade or seventh grade is when I started programming. I think it was basic and C back then, where we had only consoles back in the days. Even color monitors wasn't there, internet wasn't there. So that's when I sort of liked computers in general back then. But during that junction, I never knew I would actually end up in the gaming industry. So just as any programmer, I wanted to do engineering right away. So while I was doing engineering, I sort of fell in love with. I think it was one of those Linkin Park videos that I watched. I think Points of Authority, where they had this crazy CGI music video. So the moment I saw that, I was like, how do they make this? I want to make something like this. And just as then, I think 3D animated movies was coming out. I think Toy Story was relatively new during the time. Shrek came. So when I saw those things, right, I knew that these images were generated by the computers. So I just wanted to know how. But back then, we didn't have an iCat or Mac or anything that Arena, not even Arena. So nobody would point us, there was no internet either to actually help you out. So the only alternative that you go to is actually go and read books. So I started learning Maya and After Effects and 3D Studio Max through books that I got from the I think Landmark, right? So Landmark had some books, and I started reading these books and wanted to learn about 3D animation and stuff. So by I think second year of my computer science engineering, for some weird reason, I thought I would be an animator, and I just wanted to be an animator. So instead of doing animation, I learned After Effects, Premiere, film editing, camera stuff, and and all of the stuff that's actually not needed. I think there is no such thing as useless knowledge. So, anyways, I was in that path, and by the end of my engineering, I just got placed like any other. By the way, I did my engineering in SSN. Once I was like almost done, for some weird reason, I thought, okay, I need to be an animator. And that's when I think Mac and new institutes were like showing up during that time. So the moment I saw, okay, there's some institution that could probably teach me, and so far I've been only self-learned, right? So I wanted to learn from the professionals or learn from the teachers during the time. So right after that, I went and told my dad I wanted to be an animator. As usual, like even the parents right now, my dad completely flipped, my parents were completely flipped, and they're like, you just finished engineering. We knew that you always wanted to be in the computers, and now you want to be an animator. And I had a hard time explaining them, and I didn't go to the placement. Even though I got jobs, I didn't go to any of the jobs. I turned them down, and I joined Mac. And I think my Mac journey was didn't go well because of mainly because I didn't get what I wanted to learn from them, and to be frank, I was a little bit disappointed. So I sort of like wanted to learn by myself. Then I started downloading. I think that's when torrenting and tutorials came into place. So watched a bunch of tutorials on this one, and wanted to learn animation by the end of. I spent almost a year trying to learn animation and all the basics of art. But surprisingly, by the end of that year, I knew that I wasn't an artist. So even as much as I like art and appreciate it, I didn't have the patience to actually do the art. Art requires that amount of time that you need to spend, right? And a programmer's mind is always on more of a shortcut. You, if something is done as a repetition or a grind, right? Any programmer who looks at it wants to automate that stuff. How can you spend more time on building an automation which you would have done manually in a half an hour? So that's how sort of your developer's mind work, right? So that's when I knew that I kept going back to programming and all this logic, even though I wanted to be an artist. And in honesty, right, they were both in complete contrast. So if you want to be an artist or in VFX or an animator, right, you have very less thing to do when it comes to programming and solving problems, right? So I sort of felt very conflicted, and I think that's when I joined. I applied for VFS, Vancouver, as an 3D animator, 3D animation program. I joined, but they called me up and they told, since you have an engineering background, would you consider joining the game design program? And even though I might have worked on games back in college when I made custom Quake maps and custom game modes, and I've been tinkering around here and there, but I never took games very seriously. I just do it for some fun. As a programming challenge, I would do it. And before that, what ended up happening is my big project was in my engineering. When I finished my engineering, the final project, right, for some weird reason, me and my friend, his name is Krishnan, so we thought, okay, we'll make a simulation of a soft body where we can say that this could be a surgery simulation. Even though that sounds incredibly ridiculous right now, it even sounded more ridiculous back then. So we didn't have any idea where to go about. So without our knowledge, we started writing our own engine back then. And after 3 months in writing our own custom engine using just DirectX, we just managed to load one 3D model inside in 3 months. So, which was a huge leap. And the college panel, nobody could review during that time. They said, you just have a 3D object rotating on screen. So obviously we got the low marks, but that was almost a stepping stone on how an 3D engine would probably work. But then we completely dismissed it, and then we can try to stay in the path of animation. So coming back to the game design program, VFS saw this project and they said, you are already good at games. Why don't you try the game design programmer? And we also require programmers in that course, right? So that it will be helpful for others to make games as well. So most of the artists and game designers were joining that program, and they had very little coders. So they said, would you be interested in joining this program? So back then, I think it was almost a split second decision that I did. I thought, okay, fine, I'll take the game design program. And I took that. Once I completed that course at VFS, I knew what I wanted to do, right? I knew that I wasn't a game designer, but I know what design was. I knew I wasn't an artist, but I knew how to appreciate and understand art, and also understand the entire pipeline of how art works, right? So how I know how the animation works, how rigging works, how skinning works, how texturing is done. So this sort of all this knowledge, right, which I thought was useless at that point, actually came to my aid by then. So then I knew. I think gaming industry is that one of those few places where you have incredibly contrasting people working together. and that's why I love game industry. Right, I wouldn't go into any other work other than game industry if you consider me. Um, if I have to change my decision ever, go back and change something differently, I wouldn't. I would probably stay on the same path because the people that you meet in the gaming industry are so eccentric. I wouldn't say, yeah, eccentric, because everybody have their own ideas, they have their own inspiration, have their own backstories and how they ended up here, right? So when you mix and match all those experiences, you get something really beautiful and interesting, right? And I think that's what makes game industry sort of like the best place to be. Even though the paycheck is not the greatest, it's by the end of the day, it's one of those satisfying things that you would probably do. And to be honest, it's a difficult path to be in, but by the end of the day, I think it's worth it, at least for me.
Yeah. So like Josh, like how much you like love game jams, and like what's the best game jam experience that you ever had?
So one of the best experiences I had with game jams, I wasn't familiar with game jams in the game design program, right, Vancouver. We used to like try to make a game within a week or two, right? And all of these guys are completely noob to how to actually develop a game. So these things usually take crazy crunch. We hardly like sleep for more than 72 hours. I think at one time we were staying awake for 100 hours plus,
Oh my god.
and we were just chugging on energy drinks and trying to stay awake. The productivity just dropped like all low after 72 hours. Like we hardly did any work after that. But by the time we chugged in so much energy drink that we couldn't sleep, and we almost crashed. But that's not the best experience. I would say that's one of the worst experiences. And the other game jam that I did was while I worked for a company in Canada, I think XMG in Toronto. I think we had a game jam with 48 hours or 72 hours, something like that. So we just like sat down and came with this random idea where we sort of push the cows inside a slaughterhouse, and it was like one of those weird mechanics that oddly became incredibly fun right back then. And by end of the week, we went back to the same game. We went back to the same game, and we saw, man, this mechanics actually seems to be pretty fun, right? And then we changed from the slaughterhouse to a barn where you need to save the cows from the aliens. And that's where we actually published that game within a week, calling it Cow versus Aliens. And within a month, right, that game was on the top 10 in the App Store in 2010, I think, 2010.
Wow.
So that was one of those weird game jams which came and sort of you found a weird mechanic that actually worked. And it was, when we started out, it was supposed to be a team collaboration, get to know how, right? But by the end, we had a very good product. Not every game jam's supposed to have a product, so I think that's what your motto should be, right?
Yes.
And that's what we know. Like you sort of have more experience with people rather than try to have one objective, right? In
Yeah.
game jam.
Yes.
Yeah.
So like you're developing more games in Hammerplay, and like you're the CTO there. Like there are like many indie game developers who like to set a good production pipeline for their independent games, like indie games or something. Like what do you say the basic structure of a developing game, or like can you explain one good production pipeline for indie developers when they are working individually?
Wow. Yeah, this is a difficult one to actually answer. When even seeing that question, I was like thinking about it. What's the best approach of doing things? So, I think by the core, right? I
Yeah.
think everything comes back to the team and understanding each other's strength by the end of the day. So, at least at Hammerplay, even though I worked for Gameloft, XMG, and Swaps, right? I've met amazing people throughout my journey. But when it came to at least Hammerplay, right? Call it luck or fate, I'm not sure. But for some odd reason, like a good team sort of got into an automatic mode, which like are very unlikely to happen. I just love my team here. Okay. So what ended up happening was how we actually go about when it comes to actually having structure, right? We bounce off ideas. There is no designated game designer, right? I usually say everybody has a game idea. The thing is, ideas are cheap. Unless you can sell your own idea or convince the other people about your idea and take critical feedback on your idea, it doesn't mean anything. Most cases, whenever people pitch an idea, right, or a game concept, right, they sort of immediately treat it as their own baby and they wouldn't allow it to be modified by others and they wouldn't take criticism in a very nice way. People get very defensive immediately when you have an idea being turned down or modified by the other person. So I think the core of any good game design and good games, right? You have to keep it organic within your team. You have to exchange and you have to also kill the ideas that just wouldn't work, right? So in our in-house, right, we must have ditched at least 30 plus games. And the things that I would have actually got published would be somewhere between 5 to 6. But to reach that 5 to 6, right, we would have killed at least 30 ideas, and most of them are really good prototypes. It must have had one good mechanic, but at the end of the day, it just wouldn't scale or just it wouldn't work, right? So we just ditch them or just archive them. So good pipeline is like where you guys just sit, talk about an idea, get inspired by one idea, and try to do as fast as possible, right? And this is where the a good team comes in place. An artist would invariably inspire a developer to be better. So the moment I start, right, we start having an idea, then we start working on a prototype as quick as possible. Say within 4 to 5 hours of time, we just try to create some boxes and just try to nail that controls, right? If it feels good or not. While I'm working on that, the artist immediately start doing some sketches or rough sketches around it on the character or level design or on the world, right? The moment you see that, that becomes a contagious energy cycle, right? The artist sort of inspire the developers and I want to plug it inside the game as soon as possible. So that loop sort of works incredibly good. So once you have a rough prototype, the programming doesn't need to be the best programming. As long as you can see the mechanic and play the game, right? That needs to be done within the first 72 hours to 100 hours, right? The core mechanic alone. So once you see that, once that works, and then you can go back, refactor your code, and then sort of plan and scale and a timeline for the entire project. So that's how we usually take things inside. There is no concrete one guy who dictates everything and say this is where you're supposed to go. Even though it helps if you have a designer who can understand whether something can work or not. But in most cases, a good team that can take critical feedback is the key in most cases.
Okay, cool. So like what techs you generally use in Hammerplay to develop your games, Josh?
Yeah, this is in we are not biased to any engine and say Unity, right? Even though Unity is the most famous one, and when we started out, I think we used Unity as the primary engine, and in most cases, we do use Unity in most of our projects that we use. So we have this philosophy where we see Unity or engine or any other tech, right, as a bunch of tools by the end of the day. So the moment you say that I'm a Unity developer, right, you're sort of locking yourself down on what Unity has to offer. Even though it offers a lot, you're sort of limiting yourself and limiting your idea within that scenario when what the tool could probably offer you. So we started doing a reverse of this one after a while, and in a weird case, once it got clicked, when we started out, we have all this notion of saying that we should only do Unity. We will never ever go to web games or anything. We only will do hardcore casual games, right? So we sort of locked ourselves inside this notion back in the start. So then we had to break that notion, and then we thought there is no such thing as Unreal developer. There is no such thing as Unity developer. There's something called game developer. That's all we have, right? By the end of the day, you have a game idea and you have a platform that you want to put it on, right? Then pick the tools that you want to do, right? So in our general case, right, the greatest leap that we did was jump into HTML5. So back then there was HTML5 wasn't even a thing. So Geo came to us and their requirements was insane. They wanted the game to be less than an MB, somewhere between 500 KB to 600 KB, and they wanted it to be HTML5, and it has to be canvas, not WebGL. So we immediately thought we will just turn it down. But for some weird reason, we just wanted to do some R&D. So Harish came and we just pitched some bunch of ideas and did some R&D with Phaser and stuff. And by the end of the day, we had a very good game that went huge on Geo platform, right? So that's when we thought, okay, we shouldn't limit ourselves within this game engines and stuff, right? So inside our studio, I think we range from Unity, some Cocos projects, and some we have Phaser. And then I think 2 years ago, I think we were using Unreal in certain projects. So I think these are four most used engine. But I think recently we've been doing some R&D with multiplayer. So we had to write our own engine on the back end. So we are also working on our own custom engine in-house during this time. So those are the tech stacks that we usually use.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that, your multiplayer game engine. Can't wait to see that.
Yep.
So, what are the pros and cons in developing games in frameworks rather than game engines? What would you say there?
We have a game engine on a weekly basis now. I don't know, for some weird reason, people think that we have to release a game engine on weekly basis. So if you go, when you started out in 2000, you had like 4 game engines out there, and 2 of them or 3 of them will cost you $1 million just to get the license during the early 2000s. That includes Unreal and CryEngine. And Unity was the only engine back then that was accessible to the normal indie developer, right? But surprisingly, right now, we have hundreds plus of game engines and however number of frameworks out there, right? So that also sort of shows you how organic the industry is right now, right? So why people make other engines when the thought process comes in, right? That means one of those engines is not giving something that they need, right? That level of control or that level of finesse that requires to make those tools is not there. That's why people make more custom engines by the end of the day. So game frameworks gives you an edge over a game engine. For example, I think we can give an example in our own game. When we were working in Battle Legends, right? And we had a hiccup of how to use the tiled maps, right? In Unity, you have this better tile map editor, but when we were using Cocos and also inside the game engine on the server side, we had to write our own custom stuff there. So I think that's when we started using frameworks like Babylon.js or Phaser.js, take those style sheets and how their logic works and start customizing and make our own sort of custom engine based off that one. So a game framework could always and every time would give you more control over how you want the game engine, and that in turn will change how the games work. But in most cases, there would be a game engine out there for most of your solutions, right? If you're starting out as a small team, say two or three, and you guys are making a game, right? I would highly recommend you guys stick to any game engine, right? Make sure what platforms they're going and how it affects your pipeline, and try to stick or retrofit your game inside those game engines rather than jumping onto frameworks. Frameworks, only when this is not being offered, right? Then go for a framework. And if you have a dedicated developer resource that is not working on the game but working on the pipeline, then yes, fine. You can have one person constantly improving a game framework. Should be fine with that.
Yeah.
But in most cases, if you're a small team, I would highly recommend you stick to a game engine. And once you figure out that game engine is not working, then try looking for game framework.
Awesome. Cool. Cool. So, like, what advice you would give to the game developers here in the Jam to, how to explore and like improve their skills as a developer?
So as a developer, okay. The first and foremost is stop being biased. The the tech companies or Unity is not going to pay you extra or give you anything extra in being super faithful to them, right? The every juniors that we sort of apply or say okay junior position or intern position, right? Most of them come and say I only use Unity to make my games. I do not know this engine. I'm in most cases I'm baffled when people say that, right? There is no such thing as Unity developers. By the end of the day, there's only developers, okay? And your only primary job right there is to solve problems, okay? It could be a small problem, it could be a big problem, it could be broken down to smaller problems. But at the end of the day, you are there for the team to find a solution, and you have to do whatever it takes, whatever tools that you have in hand, and what's best for the project by the end of the day. So that's one major advice I would give for anyone who's starting out with the game developers, right? But I'm not ditching on Unity at this point. I'm saying Unity is brilliant, but the problem is Unity gives you that amount of ease that you forget about system architecture or software design in general. So I have seen Unity developers who have next to no knowledge in Whoops, right? Because it's a component based system, and there's so many bad practices out there to go about. People want to just make a game as quick as possible, but when it comes to scale or teamwork, right? You need to sort of plan things out bigger than that. So I would still say if you're a developer, make sure you have a strong knowledge in systems and design, software engineering, algorithm, and oops, right? Once you master this one, I think your mindset wouldn't be as locked within one engine or be debating about which engine is better or which language is better. I think those points are sort of useless and pointless when it comes to actual developers. You're there to solve a problem by the end of the day. Stop debating about tech.
All right. So, what will be the future in game development? Like, what role the multiplayer games will have in that in the future?
So we are at a weird crossroads. I think game industry hasn't been this recognized in a very long time. And for some weird reason, game developers are more valued recently, basically because of blockchaining, cryptocurrency, and the metaverse. So these concepts were already there. If you have already played the Second Life or Sims, World of Warcraft, I mean, this stuff was already there. It's nothing new, right? When they say metaverse, Minecraft was already there. So when they come and say and try to sell the idea of metaverse as to something new, and it just recently, and they're trying to hype it up, it's sort of baffling, but at the same time, it's good because for some weird reason, we developers are being recognized more recently, even though it's an weird hype that we have. So I think the future sort of holds. I think I'm still having some apprehensions about blockchaining, but at the same time, I think that will give a lot of room for developers to thrive. As long as developers can thrive, that's good enough for me, right? It doesn't matter what tech they're using or what direction they're actually going. So as long as game developers thrive in an environment, that's good enough for me. So I think multiplayer is going to be a huge thing if because everybody's going to try to take a piece of the pie in the metaverse concept. So and that being said, that means your server tech and DevOps team should be top notch. So I think multiplayer plays a huge role. I think when it comes to even real money gaming, that's been a huge boom here in India. You've seen Winzo, MPL, Dream 11. I think a few more. Paytm, I think so. Paytm and Flipkart is also there. So real money gaming has been there for a thing. So that means multiplayer has a huge role to play at this point. So I would suggest people to also learn um, coding, say Node.js, try to experiment with Box2D.js, learn about how the server works, how ping works, how a socket IO works, and or a web socket, how do they work. I think if you can start researching now, I think multiplayer and the this multiverse thing, real money gaming, is already on a boom, and they have a huge requirement in that space. So if you want to have yourself over the edge or over other developers, I think you should come out of that comfort zone of no, I'm just going to use Unity in this closed cycle. And I'm not saying you shouldn't use Unity. I'm saying try to figure out and try to also learn about server sites and stuff because multiplayer is going to be a huge thing in the future.
Awesome, awesome. So, what kind of games you like to play, and like, can you name any two of your favorite games that you made and you played? Actually, you developed one and
Okay.
you played. Yeah.
Okay. This is. I haven't played games in almost 2 years now. I think before pandemic, I played God of War. That's the last time we were in the office, so we played that. And in office, we play. We have multiplayer sessions. The common, the usual suspects of Counter Strike. We play TF2 and we play Overwatch. And I think some of the guys right now are playing Warzone remotely, working from home style. But the games that we made and played was few is one of those games that we made as a prototype in house. That's when we had a huge blast. We made a game, prototype called Bomber Royal, right? So it was just like PUBG or something where you have a cloud that's closing in, but you don't have any other weapons. You can just plant bombs and run, right? I mean, it's an old mechanic, but we made it as a multiplayer, and then we added the battle royal mode, so that the map will keep shrinking, and you have to keep planting bombs and run around. This was one of those super fun games that we made inside within 2 or 3 days. But by the end of the day, the entire office was having a blast playing this game. Uh, Sadly, we still haven't started that game or even wanted to finish it, even though we enjoyed it in house playing it so much. The other game that I enjoyed playing and make was I think one game called Pirate Tanks. I think we gave it to MPL now. But that is one of those games where only one programmer and one developer. That was me and Sharath. We just came along and we was like, we are going to make a tank sort of multiplayer where we also have Worms World Party, right? Where the map is also destructible. Then we have to sync it through the multiplayer and play it. Believe it or not, we made that game in 4 days. It was one of those fun projects that we loved playing and making at the same time.
Awesome, awesome. So, like, we have some questions over here, and like, think like, wait, I'll throw one by one. And if you wanna, guys, like, if you wanna ask any questions, please raise your hands and like, request to speak, so that like we can, yeah. So the first thing is okay, like Dinesh is requesting. Dinesh, you can accept and speak.
Jinesh, I think there should be an accept button on top.
On top, like you can see an accept button, green banner on top of your screen. Yeah. Hi, Dinesh.
Hello. Can I ask question?
Yeah, sure, dude.
Yeah, I want to ask question on level designing.
Okay.
How do you change your approach when you want player to pay attention or go here directly versus it's okay to wander around?
Um, I think it's completely on based on the game of the level design. So you want people to like wander around pointlessly? Is that your thing, or do you want to go them to the hot spots right away?
Yeah, I want that the player should go there directly rather than wander around.
So I think heat zone maps are sort of those things where you need to see where the player would go. But when you are a level designer, right, you think that the player would probably go to this place. But the moment you give a person a fresh eyes and ask them to play, right, they would exactly do the opposite, right? So, like in a level design, there are like few parameters where you want them or a player to go in a certain direction, right? If you have played a game like Uncharted or Last of Us, I think those guys use color contrast, which tricks your brain to going in one place. So they have something interesting in one of those places, and your brain automatically sort of goes in that direction subconsciously. So you can try that one and have sort of colors, and then you can also start doing. I don't know which editor you're using right now. I think
Unity.
Unity, right? Unity does have heat maps. So when you created a level design, make sure you add a heat maps inside and test it with people, right? See where they are actually going and why they are doing that. And then you can sort of modify the level design based off that one. So my inspiration is take any multiplayer map, or if you're going for an open world, right? Say, I don't know, top of my mind, I think God of War sort of comes to my brain, or even GTA, even in an open world, right? They sort of influence your brain to go in certain directions without your own knowledge. Try to learn how they sort of approach this problem. When it comes to level design, there are two things. There are a lot of case studies you can do, previous games that they've already done. There are better game designers than me who have proven methods on how to actually have a level design. And the second thing is you have to find what mechanics and why it works for your game, right? I don't know how many people have played the game inside. They have no UI, they have no tutorial whatsoever, but they teach the entire mechanics just through level design. It's just remarkable.
Yeah.
Right. Any
Yeah,
questions?
I'm currently working on 2D platformer game called Mystic Ninja.
Very nice, man.
Yeah.
Can't wait
So
to take a
thank you
look
for
at it.
answering. Yeah, thank you for answering question.
No
Cool.
worries, man.
Fine. I'll pick the next one. Mr. Dimak, you have anything to say?
Yeah, the game you're talking about is Bomberman, right? That multiplayer.
Yes, yes.
I too made a clone about it in a Photon, right?
Wow,
In
cool,
Unity,
man.
and it was so fun. The bugs were so glitchy, and yeah, at last I made it.
Very nice, dude.
Do you
Can't
have
wait
any
to
questions
play.
regarding anything?
No,
Okay, fine. Cool. And I'll put Rajesh next. Yeah, Rajesh, you can accept. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello.
Hi, Rajesh.
Hi Joshua. Actually, my doubt is about the networking part.
Yes.
Like previously during my college days, I got a client project for cloning the 8-ball pool mobile game.
Okay.
So when I was trying to like that, those time I was only familiar with Photon for multiplayer.
Yep.
So I was trying to replicate the physics with Photon, like the jet body components with those things, but I couldn't able to get that exact simulation on both player sides.
Exactly.
So what I couldn't able to end up the project successfully. So what problem? Somewhere I read that they have done something like an actual 8-ball pool game. They have done something called server side simulation kind of thing.
Yes.
So I couldn't able to do a research and furthermore I couldn't get any resource on that. Like what my doubt is like how those server side simulations are done and exactly what's happening in those processes. Like to make a physics based simulation game and to keep sync all those clients, what is actually done?
Did you try using rigid body photon view?
Meg,
Like that?
I think
Yeah, rigid body
Joshua
photon.
would answer this.
No, I think this is a brilliant question, by the way. I think the steps that we did was the same thing. We had a much more crazier game, which was air hockey. So this was incredibly fast paced, and Unity as such, right, has a very bad fixed step, right, when it comes to the physics. So
Yes.
this is called the fixed step physics simulation. So there's only Havoc that provides a fixed physics steps during this time. So what ends up happening is every computer has a different float value generation, right? So those small inaccuracies in those float values give you a completely different simulation in different devices. Or even on the same devices, you will have different simulation of physics, right? This is called a physics step lock. Okay, this is sort of a big issue. So there are two ways to actually go about this one. Okay, the first thing that we did when we started using Photon and wanted to have a fast-paced game, right? When it comes to multiplayer, right? There are like two types of major multiplayer that we have. That's one is P2P and one is authoritative,
Yes.
right? So Photon by nature is a P2P game. That means the game is simulated on both the ends and nobody has no authority on what the actual game is or the state should be. So you would have probably run out on the same problem, right? When you try to hit that ball and the ball simulation would be different on one screen.
Yeah, it was actually.
The other one would have been different. So if you would have wanted to mitigate that issue, the easiest fix would have been like the guy who played, right? That state should be synchronized to the next one.
Okay, like the player who is playing will be actual part of the physics.
Yes, and that physics positions would have been just sent as a message to the second player, and he would have just allocated or course corrected that simulation. So there would be a snap on the other person, but that's the cheapest fix that you have if you're using Photon, right? Because Photon A doesn't know which person has the actual authority. You have a master client, but that doesn't mean that he is responsible for the entire physics simulation, right? So this is where the authoritative comes, where PUBG comes in, or Call of Duty, or any of those games. They all use custom network solutions. So that's why when you go out and see, right, the ones multiplayer or there are other custom solutions which offers you authoritative, they are incredibly expensive. Okay, so there's a reason why they're expensive, and I think I can give you a very alternative solutions to this one. For now, I think the discussion is not about multiple. So I'll sort of like make it quick, or we'll have another session on how to make authoritative multiplayer, right? I'm working on those ones. So the general
made a game when he's in college. Like, what tech you used for your multiplayer game, Rajesh? Finally,
libgdx. For rendering, I use libgdx. For the multiplayer thing, I just use the API calls and the database to so like my game was like asynchronous multiplayer game like Clash of Clans.
Okay.
So where there is no real time thing. So only the thing you need to like who is the player is offline, you're going to beat them. It's kind of game like that.
That's brilliant. Actually, you're actually going on the right path.
Okay.
So I can give you that. Even though it's frustrating when it comes to multiplayer because there is very less resources out there to actually.
Yeah, I couldn't able to find anything to learn, so I just tried random stuff which I got from the online. So I just evaluate myself to through that.
Okay, there's two solutions to authoritative, at least in my thing one. So authoritative means one guy simulates the entire game world and synchronizes the state to every other client.
Okay, in that case, that is a player or just is a computer?
That's not a player. That you have to have a dedicated server.
Dedicated.
That's why when
Okay,
you
that
play
is.
Counter Strike or TF2 or any Valve game, you have a dedicated server that's actually running. That is
Okay.
responsible for the entire simulation of the world and the
That will
state.
be the best thing to simulate the game. Actually,
That's the best solution and also seems to be an expensive solution.
expensive solution. Yes.
So what ends up happening is imagine PUBG, right? PUBG means one game server means one game session. Allocate
Okay, yes.
one dedicated server to that. So when 100
Oh.
players are jumping inside, you're
So
actually
100
allocating
servers, right? So 100 instance of that thing.
one instance of the server is actually taken. So imagine running a AAA game engine inside a server. Okay, so a normal virtual private server would cost you $20. Okay, so running a dedicated AAA game engine on a server that's remote, right? They're going to charge you a bomb. So what then they basically end up doing is make a version of your Unity game to headless mode and run that game inside a server, and that game will hold all the state of the world and then synchronizes with the other Unity clients that you have right now. So running
what happens is like when the player, like when I want a session for a game, like particular for 5% to join, I just launch a new instance of the Unity as a server mode to be as a bigger server for those 5 people, right? Okay.
The easiest solution that you have is AWS offers called the Game Lift, right? You can integrate and test this out, but I wouldn't choose that route because it's incredibly expensive. And running a game engine inside a server actually a heavy overhead on the hardware that it actually uses. So what we end up doing is trying to make an existing engine as a game server. Right? This is what we're doing traditionally, what PUBG or Valve or anyone is. And there's an alternative method to this one. Okay, Node.js has changed a lot of stuff. So I would encourage you to take a look at a framework called Coliseus.
Okay.
Coliseus.
It's a Node.js framework.
Yes, it's a Node.js WebSocket solution that they have, completely open source. It's one of the most brilliant frameworks out there, multiplayer framework that I've used. So what ended up happening is you sort of build your own engine inside Node.js.
Okay. So we in that case, if our game is built in Unity, we just kind of
Unity will be more like a front end.
Okay.
Trying to synchronize the state that's happening inside the server. But the thing is, Node.js may not be the most complex one, and it's not even a game engine inside, right? But you can sort of simulate your own world inside or like mechanics. In Battle Legends, we had the same problem. So in Battle Legends, we used Node.js and we wrote our custom engine.
Okay.
Using Box2D. So
we simulate the whole physics, like simulation of the physics with the Box2D in the Node.js, right?
Yes, within Node.js, there are so many physics packages already out there.
So in that case, it's a lightweight physics engine running in the server, which we can use to say, okay.
So this, in case, has a very small overhead because it doesn't have all the rendering engine or the other UI, and it doesn't be any bulky. The entire game engine is 2 or 3 MB.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, and it takes a memory of almost an MB. That's it. And it does the entire physics simulation there. In that way, we kept an actual physics engine running on the game without having to have a huge overhead of the Unity engine.
That's actually a brilliant idea.
So this is the second approach we have. We are working tutorial so that we can help others on how to make better multiplayers. Photon is not an ideal solution. Photon is those quick solutions that you have, but the moment you go halfway through, you'll be shooting yourself in the foot.
And that always happens.
Yeah.
Awesome. So,
It's actually a very great solution. I'll be trying it out in coming days.
Yep.
we have
Say hi to Edel. He's the original author of the framework. I think our game has also been featured in their website.
Okay.
Ulysses, we've been pushing that framework to the limits.
So like we have a few more questions in the chat box. It's first like Dhruv, like is Dhruv here? Like I think like he left. Okay. So Shadow is asking like I'm a beginner in 3D modeler and a beginner in pixel artist. Plan to learn Godot game engine. Any suggestion to me that because I don't have any programming knowledge.
I would say stick with Unity. If you're an artist and you want to see your work being showcased, and if you're a 3D artist, I would say Unreal, but Unreal can be over. For something to get started as quick as possible, I would highly recommend Unity.
True,
And
and I think Shadow is having low hardware, and those who have lower hardware, Unreal is a bit of.
yes, then that's why I suggest Unity in most
Yeah,
cases. Unity is a brilliant tool when artists are trying to get familiar with an entire gaming pipeline as such. And also it has Bolt, the visual scripting thing. So I think Unity is a very good start for any developers to get started, right?
Awesome. So the next question is from Shattered Cookie. How do you think like non-hyper casual games are doing currently in India? Like because I feel most development in India goes towards that area, the hyper casual games.
Um, Mostly because I think casual games are here for the win. Indian people, even though you see people playing PUBG or those familiar names of Call of Duty, I think most of the huge population still plays casual games, right? So I think casual games and plus money is equal to success. that's the that's the formula Indians work on. Indians like to have free stuff, and Indians like to get money on their on their time spent. So I think that's where all these guys, MPL, Winso, all these guys have an edge because it's social gaming. It's not very serious. Anyone can pick up anything that they want. It has one or two mechanic, and that works, right? So if you're saying if Indians would ever make a AAA game, I hope so. I'm really hoping that. In fact,
Yes. Yeah, I think like we are done with the questions. And Dhruv is here, like, but like I can ask his question. Okay, Sivanesh, like, you want to ask anything?
Yeah. Hi. Uh, like you said that multiplayers are the future and will become the future. What genre do you think will last long?
no. When I said multiplayer is going to be the only survivor, I didn't mean that. I meant
This thing, it's
games
gonna
as a
develop.
casual thing will always be there.
Yeah. Okay.
There's no genre that would probably win and be like I am the reigning champion and everybody would probably only play me. It would never happen, right? Games as such exist because of the variety, right? So that space wouldn't ever change. What I meant by multiplayer is multiplayer has a lot of scope recently just because of multiverse and this blockchaining gaming are in the picture. Everybody is incredibly willing to invest in the games because they want to have people interacting in the virtual space. So if you want to people interact in the virtual space, you need to know what multiplayer is. So that's why I meant multiplayer would be the next big thing. But multiplayer as a genre, say saying that Call of Duty or PUBG, that would be the best and that would be the winner. I can't say that, and I'm pretty sure that there'll be like no one winner when it comes to a platform.
What's your opinion on VR? VR
Opinion on VR is right now is it's a wild west, right? There is no unified tech that can say this is going to be the correct direction that we go, right? For example, even though Facebook or Meta right now has the largest investment in VR. I think their VR headsets still have a sort of problems here and there, and you also see competitions with HTC and Valve on the other side. So I think the battle is still on who actually wins and sort of unifies. This is how we are supposed to go. And this used to happen back in the 70s and the 80s with the microprocessors. Everybody had different architectures, and then Intel came up with the x86 architecture, and that became the standard till this long, right? Of course, we have ARM and other processors which actually won. But I think that's the same thing that applies in the VR right now. A lot of people are doing a lot of R&D, and nothing has been set or written on stone that this is how the pipeline would be.
Yeah. Okay. Like, how much long would you think that there'll be a defined system for VR?
VR is still expensive to make. And the chip shortage right now has made it only worse. Even as much as I like John Carmack, who is leading the entire, he's like my hero, John Carmack, the guy who invented ID software. He practically invented 3D engine. Even though he's heading the VR division in Meta, I still think the cost of making a VR headset and coming to a consumer, it's going to take a little longer. And also the hype is also fastly dying down. A few years back, I think VR phones were a huge thing. Then people actually started using it, and then they thought it was more of a gimmick, right? And also it gave them nausea. So until the hardware catches up and also the hardware prices will be accessible to the consumers, I'm not sure how VR is going to do.
Okay, cool. Like we have one question from Dhruv. What is the role of CTO in a company? Like that's what is the question.
Honestly, I didn't even want this role title, to be honest. So, in our office, since we don't have any middle management, we actually don't care about any of the roles that we actually play. I still program. I heard that most of the CTOs don't program; they sort of only give the architectural structure in a technical format, and others would program. But till date, I code and I also refactor most of the juniors' code. So I think my role as such, I'm not sure, at least within this company, there is no defined role on what people are supposed to do. So the only reason why I have the title CTO is relatable to the clients, right? When the clients hear that, okay, a CTO is also talking to this, they know that, okay, they have put the best man for the job, right? It's more for the suits rather than inside the team. But my daily job, right? That wouldn't be much of a difference between a tech lead and a CTO. My job would be like whenever people come up with the games or an idea, I would usually suggest them a pipeline on how to actually bring the art inside, how to do the programming, and once they did the programming, I would probably do a code review and probably give them course corrections on how they can do it better. Because in most cases, I would have already solved that problem ahead. That means I wouldn't give out the solutions directly. I would make my programmers actually break their head over it. And when they come back, and then I give them a better solution, or in some cases, they would also have a better solution to that one. So that's mostly my role. And I also still work on the projects that I have in house. So yeah, that's my role.
He's saying like that. He's Dhruv saying like he's also he's a 3D artist, but like game development side. So is it possible for him to move into the game development with a very little programming knowledge?
Yes. I would highly motivate any artist to come inside programming. I don't want them to be programmers, but having a programming knowledge is like a huge thing for an artist. By the way, that's where you have technical artists. If you can make shaders and if you can make like procedural models, right? Those like are the hot selling pancakes right now. Those people are in the highest demand. I think it's vice versa. If a technical person knows art, that's also valued hugely. I think you guys shouldn't be locking yourself saying that I'm only a developer. I would never ever do art. Like, have as much as knowledge from other discipline, right? That helps a lot. So if you want to get started in programming and you're intimidated by actual coding, I would highly starting with Unity and Bolt, or if you're using Unreal and Blueprint, right? So you get the concepts of logic when you do it visually, and eventually you can start testing or picking up any language. I would highly recommend C Sharp. It's incredibly easy to learn. It has a low learning curve, and Unity already helps, right? I wouldn't recommend an artist to get started with C++ because it can be daunting when you begin with. So for starters, I think visual scripting is already there, and you can get most of the mechanics done. So yeah, if you're an artist coming inside development, highly recommend it.
So how to AR games is asking like how to stick with the game and the game idea.
Is it concerning AR? Oh, his
No,
name is
no,
AR
it's
Games.
a yeah.
Okay. How to stick to a game idea and make it through? You would probably know if that game idea is better or not in the first 72 hours. If you have made a working prototype, you would know if that game is or not. So, but just like any other thing, right? Um, Everything requires a discipline, some level of focus. That's where you sort of rely on a very good team, right? That's why you don't work on solo projects. Solo projects, you will get fatigue after a while because jumping between art and programming will make your brain go very tired very soon. So that's why you work with the team, so you have motivation thing jumping back and forth. And that's how you finish a project.
Cool. So I think like we are done with the questions. Finally, thank you, Josh. Thanks for coming. Like
No
I
worries.
would like you to give some tips and advice for the jammers during this game jam.
I wish I was jamming with you guys because the last time I did Ludum Dare. Make sure you guys collaborate as much as possible. Don't be all focused about what the end product is going to be. Um, Sometimes it clicks, sometimes it doesn't, and also have some selfish motive whenever you're doing a game jam. So whenever I work with a team or with game jammers, right, I try to bring new fresh blood or people that hasn't been working with each other or didn't have an opportunity before with each other. So when you mix and match, you find a new combination of people that you can work with. So my selfish motto, and whenever I do a game jam, right, I would usually have a tech that I need to experiment with, and I use that as an excuse to explore that area. We don't usually bother about the end result, even though by somehow we end up making one game. But an artist would have been wanting to try one art style that they always wanted to do. That's a selfish motive. And the programmer always would wanted to try out a framework or a method that he has been exploring for a while. I think game jams are like the best time to actually try this out without having any consequences. I mean, but the worst case that you can have is a good experience and a learning curve, right? The best case is you have a good game in your hand, right? So either way, it's a win-win situation whenever you're jamming. So have fun, guys. That's by the end of the day, it's super fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Thank you for your time. Yeah, I think like we can end this session.
Okay.
Thank
Have
you.
fun, guys.
Thank
See you
you.
probably next year as one of the jammers.
Cool. Bye, guys.
Cool, man.
Let's start making the games. Let's continue working on the game. And we'll be on for the next session at 3 p.m. today. So, see you guys. Bye, bye.
Cool. Bye, guys.
Bye, bye. Hello. ஹலோ பாலாஜி.
ப்ரோ அடுத்தது வந்து 2 மணிக்கு குவிஸ் ஒன்று பண்றோம். ஒரு 2 மெசேஜ் போட்டுருங்க.
வாலண்டியர் இல்ல எதுக்கு அதுல டாக்ஸ்ல அங்க உட்கார்ந்துருக்காங்க?
எங்க இல்லையா ப்ரோ யாரும்?
போயிட்டாங்கல்ல?
போயிட்டாங்க.
ஓகே ஃபைன்.
ம்
ஓகே
இவர் இப்பதான் ஸ்டார்ட் பண்ணாரு போல ப்ரோ அந்த கோட்.
ஓகே.
யாரு?
அது அந்த ரிஜிட் பாடி போட்டான் லேக் அவர் லேட்டன்சி தான் சொல்றாரு.
ஏய் அவன் நல்ல ப்ரோகிராமர் அந்த பையன். அவன் எக்ஸ்பீரியன்ஸ்
அதான் ப்ரோ
ப்ரோகிராமர்.
லைக் இவரு இந்த கோட் ஃபார்வர் அதான் ப்ரோ லேட்டன்சி தான் ப்ரோ அவர் அப்படி சொல்றாரு.
லேட்டன்சி சரி பண்றதுலாம் வேற விஷயம். அவன் கேக்குறது அது கிடையாது. அது ஆக்சுவலி நானும் பண்ணியிருக்கேன். அது அந்த லேட்டன்சி இது பண்றதுக்கு வந்து அதுக்கு ஒரு இது உண்டு போட்டோ
ஸ்கிரிப்ட் இருக்கும்.
ஆமா அது இல்ல அது அவனுக்கு தெரியும். அது அவன் என் கம்பெனில தான் ஒர்க் பண்ணிட்டு இருந்தான். அவனுக்கு அதெல்லாம் தெரியும். இட்ஸ் நாட் லைக் எல்லாமே அது வந்து யூனிட்டியில இருக்கிறது மட்டும் இல்ல. நெட்வொர்க்கிங் ரொம்ப கஷ்டம். அது லார்ஜர் ஆடியன்ஸ் நீ பண்ணும் போது உனக்கு தெரியாது. ஆக்சுவலி நீயே செல்ஃப் லேர்ன் பண்ணி படிக்கிறது ஓகே, அந்த டைம் கரெக்டா இருக்கும். பட் நீ ஒரு லார்ஜர் ஆடியன்ஸ்ட போடும் போது உனக்கு நீ நினைச்சு பார்க்காத அளவு ஒரு பக் வரும். அதனால மல்டிபிளேயர் ஏன் சின்ன ஸ்டுடியோஸ் ஏன் மல்டிபிளேயர் சஜஸ்ட் பண்ண மாட்டாங்கன்னா ஒரு ரீசன் அது. ஏன்னா நீ ஸ்டோர்ல போடும்போது ஒரு மில்லியன்ஸ் ஆஃப் யூசர்ஸ் ஒரு 1000 யூசர்ஸ் வந்து விளையாண்டாலே உனக்கு வந்து நிறைய பக்ஸ் வரும். அதை மேனேஜ் பண்ணி சப்போர்ட் பண்றது ஒரு பெரிய வேலை. அதுக்கு ஒரு பெரிய டீமே தேவைப்படும். உனக்கு நாட் லைக் ஒன் திங். அந்த மாதிரிதான்
தெரியும். அதுக்கு மேல
என்ன பாலாஜி?
கேம் முடிஞ்சதுக்கு அப்புறமா இல்ல சர்வீஸ் பண்ணிட்டே இருக்கணும். சொன்னாங்கன்னா
ஆக்சுவலா இந்த
மேன் ஸ்ட்ரீம் போயிட்டு இருக்கு. கட் பண்ணுங்க மேன்.